Madam,
The senator from Florida.
Madam President, I ask for unanimous consent that I be recognized to speak as of the morning business.
Without objection.
Madam President, I stand today here to talk about the case of Youcef Nadarkhani, and before I do, I'd like to ask unanimous consent that the privileges of the floor be granted for today's session for a member of my staff, Viviana Bovo, who's been working on this matter with me.
Without objection.
Youcef Nadarkhani was arrested in October of 2009 in Iran, and his crime that he's accused of is the crime of apostasy. And I want to read to you the charges against him pursuant to a document that was signed by two judges, and I'm going to say their names because I think one day they'll be held accountable for things like this. Their names are Morteza Fezel and Azizola Razagni. I think I got it right. But here's what it says. This is Mr. Youcef Nadarkhani, son of Bayram, 32 years old, married, born in Rasht in the state of Galan, is convicted of turning his back on Islam, the greatest religion, the prophecy of Muhammad at the age of 19, the document states. It goes on to say he has often participated in Christian worship and organized home church services, evangelizing, and he's been baptized, and he's baptized others, converting Muslims to Christianity. He has been accused of breaking Islamic law that from puberty until the age of 19, the year 1996, he was raised a Muslim in a Muslim home. During court trials, he denied the prophecy of Muhammad and the authority of Islam. He has stated that he is a Christian and no longer a Muslim. During many sessions in court, with the presence of his attorney and a judge, and he has been sentenced to execution by hanging for this alleged crime. That's what he's been convicted for. That conviction, by the way, was upheld by appeals court in that province of Galan in September of 2010. Now, in July, the Supreme Court of Iran overturned the death sentence. Again, this is according to media reports. Did not overturn the conviction, by the way, just the death sentence, and they sent the case back to his hometown of Rasht. Here's what's happened since it's gone back to his hometown. Now, the deputy governor of that province says that while he's guilty of apostasy, that's not why they sentenced him to death. They've actually come up with some new charges. They say that he is a security threat, particularly that he is an extortionist, and they claim that he's a rapist. By the way, they've never said this before until this case was sent back to them. Oh, and by the way, he's also a Zionist, which in and of itself, according to them, is punishable by death in Iran. That's where the case stands today. And so there's been reports time and again about what's happening in Iran with this case. His lawyers have now been publicly saying they expect to know by Saturday whether their client will be executed in Iran, quite frankly, for the crime of not just being a Christian, but of converting others to Christianity. Obviously, this is an outrage. And I'm glad to see that voices from this government and from all over the world have expressed themselves against it. But I think it's important for us to express ourselves against this as well for the following reasons. Number one is this is a time when Americans and this nation is increasingly asked to turn to international bodies to resolve disputes. And so let's visit that for a moment, because we have international bodies and we have international conventions that Iran has signed, particularly two. One is the Declaration of Human Rights. They signed it in 1948. The other is the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights. They signed that in 1966. And if you've signed these covenants, any nation who signed on to these sorts of activities by a court in your country are unconscionable, illegal. They violate these things. So I'm still waiting, and hopefully we'll see some sort of action on behalf of the United Nations and nations like Russia and China, for example. Of course, it'll be difficult for China to speak out against oppressing religious minorities when they do that quite often in that country as well. But that being said, we're interested to see where some of these other countries will be on this matter. And we're obviously very encouraged that the European Union has spoken about this matter. We'd like to see some of these other countries step up. We'd like to see the United Nations take a break from figuring out ways to sanction or take on Israel and maybe focus a little bit on these sorts of things, where people are facing a hangman's noose because of their religion. By the way, in Iran, this sort of thing is not just happening to Christians, and not only Christians feel oppressed, but non-Shiite Muslims feel great oppression. But here's the greater point. Beyond this outrage, and let me just say that I encourage everyone to pray tonight for the safety of Youcef Nadarkhani and for his family, and we hope that this will resolve itself. We hope that in that nation and in that government of Iran, there are reasonable people that realize what an outrage, what an atrocity, what a human rights violation, what a crime it would be for this man not just to be sentenced to death, to even be in jail. The second thing I would say is we should feel sorry for the people of Iran. It's hard to believe that the vast majority of people in that country agree with us. And in fact, they look at their government and say, you are isolating us from the world. If the people of Iran want to know what it is that is isolating them from progress in this 21st century, they need to look no further than Tehran and the people who are running that government. And it's sad, because I think going back to 2009, the evidence is there that especially young people in that country, they would just want to have normal lives and live in a normal country. And instead, their country is being run by individuals who think this sort of thing is okay. By the way, I would also point out to nations, for example, leaders in places like Venezuela and other nations of Latin America that so warmly welcome these leaders from Iran when they visit. This is who you're doing business with. And I would encourage the people of those countries in Latin America to turn to their leaders and ask them, why do we have a relationship with people like this? Why are people like this being invited to come into our countries and do business with us and tour our streets as heroes? This is who they are. Forget the rhetoric and put anything aside. You want to know what the leadership and the government of Iran is about? It is about this. This is who they are. And I can think of no other case before us today with regards to Iran that more clearly outlines the monsters that we're dealing with in that government than this case that I've outlined here today. And I think there's a broader conversation to be had about what Iran means. There's a lot of things going on in the world, but what's happening in Iran is important. And Iran's neighbors know it. Whether they'll admit it publicly or not, Iran's neighbors know what a danger that government and its vision for the region and the world pose. But I think this case is one that we should all speak out about. I think the eyes of the world should be turned to this case. It is an outrage. It is an absolute outrage. And there is no way in the world that we should stand by and allow anyone to be silenced, or anyone to be silent, and particularly our allies around the world and other countries and members of the so-called international community. It's time to step up to the plate and condemn these sorts of things, because Youcef Nadarkhani not only should he not be facing a death sentence, he shouldn't even be in jail. I thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor.
Madam President.
The senator from Texas.